All right. It's a serious, serious issue as our hearts break again and again. And whether it's the church in Charleston the other day, whether it's the theater in Aurora, where the trial is ongoing and the wounds are opened all over again with that awful, needless slaughter, whether it's Sandy Hook and Newtown Elementary School, on and on it seems to go. But then again, there's Luby's Cafeteria in Waco, Texas. Lives saved because someone, it was a woman, wasn't it, Katie?
Well, the problem was that she had a gun in her car, and she left it in the car due to Texas law, and her parents were executed in front of her because she was not allowed to bring it in. The law changed after Luby's massacre.
But in Colorado, not an entirely happy outcome, but a better one because a volunteer security guard at New Life Church, our neighbors in Colorado Springs, was armed and prepared. Jeannie Assam handled herself as well as any special forces might have and minimized horrible loss of life in that church. You have to reflect on the contrast between that and the Bible study in Charleston. By the way, it's been mentioned more than once this weekend of our prayers being with Charleston as a community and especially with that church. Isn't it thrilling to know that they resumed Bible study in the very room where the murders were committed scarcely a week before? So, which side of the coin, gun rights or gun control, which keeps America safer? We'll have opening statements and then we'll just volley back and forth. I have a feeling that the time's going to fly by. I'll try to keep order without injecting myself, just referee. Katie, as the affirmative that gun rights protect better than gun control, neither being an absolute, make your case in a couple of minutes.
Well, first I want to thank all of you for coming and being here this weekend. Importantly, I want to thank Mark again because a lot of the time the left doesn't want to have a debate. So I really do applaud you for showing up here in front of a crowd that probably disagrees with you on a lot of things to have a debate with me today. I also want to thank Outdoor Channel, which has sponsored this debate. Outdoor Channel has been doing a lot of work on this issue of gun control versus gun rights, and I think it's important to mention them. I also want to thank the Colorado activists who have been pushing back against the people in Colorado who are trying to take your rights away, and also thanks to the sheriffs across the country who are refusing to stand in line with politicians who want to take the rights away from the citizens who elect them. So to start off, I guess I'll just talk a little briefly about where my respect for the Second Amendment comes from. I come from a pro-gun family. At a very young age, started to understand the respect that you must have for firearms because they're so powerful and therefore require an awesome respect, and you have a duty to be educated and to understand that. And luckily, my family taught me that. And growing up and moving and being a single woman, self-defense is certainly something that I think about a lot. But more importantly, my support for the Second Amendment comes from U.S. history. And I'd like to read the Second Amendment before we get started here. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, the question today for this debate is, which makes us safer, gun control or gun rights? And I think that the data really plays that out. We have a record number of people in this country now who have concealed carry permits. We have record gun ownership in this country. And in many areas, at the same time, we have a record low of crime rates. With the exceptions, of course, of places like Chicago, New York City, and Washington, D.C. And as John mentioned, unfortunately, we do continue to see these what are called mass shootings, but the fact is that mass shootings are actually down in this country as well. And if you look at the data, since 1950, all but 2 of the mass shootings that we've had in this country have occurred outside of gun-free zones. And I think it's a really important time to take a solid look at whether gun-free zones have protected Americans or whether they have cost lives. And I certainly think and know that they have cost lives. Taking away the rights of people to keep and bear arms and to protect themselves does nothing to protect other people from violent crimes. Criminals don't care about laws. We've seen that over and over again, and they go out of their way to attack people who are in places where they know they can't fight back. And I look forward to debating this with Mark today. Thank you.
Katie, thank you. Mark, before you take your 3-minute opening statement, just move. See, I'm moving him to the right. Come on, move closer to me. We're the monster dominating Twitter this morning and all weekend. At least we aspire to be that. And I can't afford a Twitter picture suggesting that I'm arm's length from you while I'm elbow to elbow with her.
Fair enough.
Your opening statement, Mr. Levine. And by the way, what fun it has been to untangle the confusion of identities between you and the other guy. What's his name? Can't think of it. Mark Levin, the right-wing talk show host.
He doesn't have that second E, which stands for empathy. That's the difference.
Well, we're not going to count that. We're not counting gag lines against your time.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes.
So here I am. I'm Mark Levine. I'm a proud liberal sitting here in a sea of thousands of conservatives. I feel a little bit like Daniel, only I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the lions possessed firearms. And he wasn't instructed to pull their tails. So there are some differences here. Really, I'm gratified to be here. I want to thank John very much and to the entire Western Conservative Summit for having me here. I'm a firm believer that we need to talk with each other. All too often, we liberals and conservatives stand in our respective silos. We only talk politics with those with whom we agree and only watch and listen to news that's biased toward our side. And then we're surprised when things happen that we don't understand. I've always believed in crossing that divide. In fact, I've invited John on my show this Wednesday, and I'm glad he's going to attend, and I invite all of you to call in. And in the event that the thousands of you can't get in my 6 lines, I invite you to call in and talk to me anytime. I welcome conservatives on my show. Liberals and conservatives are not enemies. We all want to form a more perfect union. We just disagree on the best way to do it. And we care so passionately and love our country so much that we fight really hard for the things we believe in. But we fight with words, not with arms, and I think that's one of the things that makes America the greatest country on earth.
Amen and amen.
Now let's get to guns. It simply is not true that gun ownership makes us safer. Studies show that for every 1% increase in gun ownership in a state, there's a 1% increase in gun homicides. And if you have a gun in your home, the most likely person it will kill is you or your family. Indeed, studies have shown, and there are many studies, anywhere from 12 to 43 times more likely a gun in your home will be used against you or a member of your family. Sometimes it'll be a suicide. Sometimes it'll be an accident. It's unlikely, very unlikely, to be used in self-defense. And the same is true with all these attacks on gun-free zones. There's not a single mass shooting that has been stopped by someone wielding a firearm that was a civilian. Now, trained security officers, police, that's a different story. But think if you were in Aurora, Colorado, and you're watching a movie, and so you got your Glock in one pocket, and you've got your M&Ms in the other pocket, and you got your popcorn, and you're watching a movie, and suddenly you hear gunshots. How many people would be positioned right, mentally prepared, and have the skill in a smoke and panic-filled theater to get the right shot to kill the shooter and not to kill other people around you?
I think that woman right there would be prepared.
She would. That's why police have advised citizens not to play hero in that situation, because if that happens, sometimes they don't know who the killer is. In Tucson, Arizona, there was a man, many of you know of him. His name is Joe Zumato, if I pronounce his name right, Zumidio, who almost shot a citizen who had just disarmed the killer. And think about it. If he had taken a gun and shot someone who he thought was the killer or not, and police arrived, how do police know who the bad guy is? It's not like good guys and bad guys wear these things on their chest that say, I'm a good guy, I'm a bad guy. One other thing you should know about us liberals, and this may surprise you, if you are law-abiding and nonviolent, and you're not a terrorist, we don't want to take away your guns. We really don't. And if you believe that mentally deranged terrorists who have attempted to kill their wives and have been found guilty of that felony, if you believe they should easily own guns, raise your hands. I see no hands raised. So there's things that we agree on here, and I'd like to work on where we can agree. Thank you very much.
Mark, thank you. The chair takes cognizance of people who want to stand up and raise their hand as that individual, indeed that woman, who would have tried to stop the Aurora massacre. None of this is a joking matter, of course. The chair does not take cognizance of catcalls from the audience, please. We don't need that. I did stage the guy who tried to heckle Walker just so he could have a chance to prove his chops last night. We're not down with unstaged heckling or contributions from your lungs while the debaters are having at each other. Your turn, 2 minutes, Katie.
First of all, it's very clear that Mark has had zero training when it comes to firearms ownership or response. And if he did, he would understand.
Excuse me, Mark, are you a gun owner?
I am not.
Okay, I am.
And if he had been to a single training course and gotten an education, because that's what it is, an education, he would understand that most civilians who have concealed carry permits are actually more highly trained than police officers are. There was a story in New York City, and I was actually in this area right before it occurred a couple years ago, where a guy in New York City, where guns are banned, took a gun to his employer, shot and killed his employer, and went out into the street. The initial headline was, 9 shot in New York. And this is with all due respect to the police officers. I know that we have some here and we deeply appreciate them being here, but for the point of the story. So then the headline changes to 9 bystanders shot by police who missed. And the difference is that when a civilian misses, they are legally held accountable for the shots that they take. And the bottom line is that a lot of people who go through the training are actually more qualified in a lot of instances to make judgment calls inside of theaters, and to say that you're not going to be able to make that decision discounts the training of thousands, I'd say even millions of people all over the country. In terms of people not stopping mass shootings, the problem about stopping mass shootings is if you stop them before they start, there's no headline, right? You can't determine, well, a mass shooting was stopped because you don't know how many people would have been shot if someone hadn't taken someone out. For example, this is from the Washington Post. Just last month, or 2 months ago now, in April, an Uber driver saw a man on the street who had planned to take out a lot of people, and he stopped him with his firearm. Now, Uber has now implemented a gun-free zone policy inside their cars, which is idiotic at best, and it will only cause Uber drivers to be more at risk for the jobs that they do. But in Colorado Springs, as we mentioned, Jeannie Assam, who, yes, was a former police officer, but at the time she was a civilian working as a volunteer security guard. There are lots of people in the country who work as volunteer security guards, was able to stop a mass shooter.
Mark.
See, Katie, not everyone that owns a gun is as trained as you. And one of the things that we liberals would like to see is more people required to undergo training before they own guns. We think that makes a lot of sense. Before you drive a car, you have to take a test. Because you know why? If you drive a car wrong, it could kill people. We know that in America, the vast majority of civilians owning guns are not well trained. In fact, we know that 1/2 of Americans with guns leave their guns unlocked in their homes. 1/6 leave their guns unlocked and loaded. 7/8 of children murdered in the developed world are murdered in the United States. Every year, more children die at the hands of guns in America than all of our brave veterans have died in all of our years in Afghanistan. They've done studies to show that 1/3 of children aged 8 to 12 who find a firearm, pick it up, and pull the trigger. I was at this session. I'm glad that you've invited me for this time. I was actually at the gun session yesterday, and a woman stood up and said something that I find extraordinary. She said, "Children shouldn't fear guns, they're just a tool." I think they should. I don't want children touching hot stoves. I don't want children handling loaded firearms without supervision. For women, if they own a gun, it's 3 times more likely they'll be killed by it. 8 times more likely if their abuser is killed by it. It does not help domestic violence. Here's the thing, Katie. Many Americans who own guns are like all human beings worldwide. Sometimes we're stupid. Sometimes we make accidents. Sometimes we're drunk or tired or angry. All those things are worse with a gun.
One of the things I'm enjoying about this debate, Katie and Mark, is that it's a slogan-free zone. Thank you for the data, the statistics, the factual, and mutually respectful approach. On we go.
First, I want to address your comment about how many Americans are killed in this country with firearms. The number is about 30,000 people per year. 2/3 of those are suicides. Another half of that third are criminals killing each other in places like Chicago and New York City. The rest are negligence or murders that are carried out based on human nature. So to say that America has this gun violence problem, that people are dying as a result of gun violence based on other people owning guns and using them against their fellow citizens, just isn't accurate and isn't true. In terms of your comment about saying that we want children to fear guns, we don't want children to fear guns. We want children to respect guns, which is why organizations like the National Rifle Association have spent millions of dollars and years of resources implementing their Eddie Eagle program, which is a firearms education program for young kids. The National Shooting Sports Foundation has also implemented Project Safe Child, which is another program that promotes gun safety for children. Michael Bloomberg has spent $0 on education for children when it comes to respecting firearms. And for you to say that we want children to be running around with loaded firearms is disingenuous, and it goes against every responsible gun owner in this country who locks up their guns and keeps them away from their children.
Your turn, Mr. Levine.
I'm not saying that responsible gun owners allow their children to handle guns. I'm saying there are a lot of irresponsible gun owners in America. And I want to see where we can find agreement, Katie. I want to see if you and I can agree that you should be trained to handle a gun before you're allowed to buy one. I want to see if you and I can agree that you should have to undergo a background check if you're on the terrorist watch list. I heard Ben Carson complain about terrorists coming to the United States, but apparently the NRA wants to be able to let them get arms easily once they're here. Doesn't make any sense to me. You said that a lot of mass shootings are stopped before they start. You're right. The friend of the Charleston killer took his gun away the night before because he was drunk and he was talking about killing black people. But he gave it back to his friend because he was afraid the laws would claim he stole the gun from him. You can watch this online. So that killing could have been prevented if the laws would allow people to take away guns from people who make threats. Let's see if we can agree that body armor should only be available for police officers, because the Colorado killer in Aurora was wearing body armor. Even if you've got your Glock among your popcorn and you do shoot, you're likely to hit body armor. And unless we all wear body armor every time we go to the theater, we're not going to be protected. Let's see if you and I can find common sense ways to agree on responsible things that will make all gun owners more responsible.
Start with the body armor, would you, Katie, please?
I think that's a ridiculous argument to make that we need to ban, body armor, really. I mean, nobody is walking around with body armor. And by the way, the weapon that the Aurora shooter used would go through body armor anyway. So clearly, that's really just not an issue. It's a red herring to discuss body armor. And by the way, police officers aren't the only people who need body armor. There are some people who are private citizens who have threats against their life, and if they want to wear body armor, they should be able to. In terms of, things that, first I want to address the Charleston issue, because I think it's very important here, because now they're pushing for what they call universal background checks, okay? Let's take a look at how the Charleston killer, and I will not say his name, obtained his firearm. There are some very important facts here that we need to lay out. There has not been a confirmed story yet on exactly how. There's two main stories here. There's his father gave him a firearm for his 21st birthday, which was in April of 2015, or he purchased a firearm in April 2015 with birthday money that was given to him by his family. Here's the problem. In February of 2015, the killer had a felony charge against his record, which makes you ineligible in the background check system to purchase a firearm. So if he purchased the firearm himself in April, the system failed because states refused to put felony data into the national system. They've done a really bad job at that. That needs to get better. I think we can agree on that. Second, if his father bought him a firearm in April when he knew his son had a felony charge against him, he should be prosecuted, because that is also a felony to buy a gun for someone else who cannot buy one. On the issue of the background checks, the left acts like we don't have background checks in this country, that the terrorists can just go buy a gun without a background check. If you do this lawfully, if you buy a gun lawfully, you go to an FFL and you fill out 4 different forms of paperwork, and you have to show 2 forms of ID, one of which is your passport to prove that you're a US citizen. The FBI conducted 21 million background checks last year. So to say that we don't have background checks is absurd. The last point here is this. If you want to stop criminals from getting guns, maybe you should prosecute them for getting them illegally. Prosecutions for gun crimes, including straw purchases and buying guns when you're not eligible, have dropped 40% under Barack Obama's Justice Department, and that's important to point out.
Mark, as you reply, I'll notify the debaters that frame in your mind a 1-minute closing statement. We're just about out of our time. Mark, one thing I'm curious about, I don't want to divert you from replying to Katie, but is there a baseline or a model polity somewhere in the world that you would point us to where the balance of gun rights, gun control, you believe is ideally struck?
I don't think we're ever going to get as good as Canada or Europe or all the other places where they have 5 or 10 gun crimes a year. I don't think that's in our nature. I don't think most liberals want to go that far. I would love to see us decrease gun crimes. I do want to respond, though, to Katie, because here's the problem. Yes, we do have background checks if you buy from a licensed firearm dealer. But if you're a terrorist or you just want to kill a bunch of people, we all know where you can get guns. You know where the best place? On the internet. Just go to Craigslist. 62% of online sellers say that even if they knew you'd fail a background check, they would sell you a gun. If you want to go and buy a gun, no questions asked, just go to your local gun show, ask them, where can I buy a gun, no questions asked, and they will tell you who to go to get a gun, no questions asked. We need to ask these questions. It sounds like you support background checks. Why not make them universal? Let's close the loophole.
1-minute closing statement, and we're going to give Mark the last word. Please, Katie.
According to a CDC and Harvard study, which are both not pro-gun, by the way, they've done an analysis of all the gun control laws, which there are hundreds of them in the country, and according to their own analysis, they show that gun control does not stop crime. The response time average for police in this country to get to you if you have a problem is 10 minutes. The Newtown shooter killed 26 children in less than 5 minutes. You are your best defense. The government doesn't have a right to make you a victim. And I think moving forward with the country, we have some hope. There was a Pew Research poll that came out recently that showed the majority of people now believe that gun rights should be protected instead of implementing more gun control. Thank you very much.
Mark, last word to you, 1-minute close.
we're not going to arm the kindergartners at Newtown, nor their teacher who may be in her 70s. We're not going to give them body armor. So let's not give the criminals easy access to body armor, to cop killer bullets. Let's allow for smart guns so your gun can't be used against yourself. Let's not allow for drums where you could shoot 100 bullets. Those belong in the military, not in Aurora Theater. Let's not discount the suicides and accidents that are part of the 30,000 Americans that are killed every year. There is a reasonable compromise between liberals who simply want law-abiding people to have access to guns and not the criminals. And there are things we can do, and I appreciate you all listening to me. And if you disagree with me, call into my radio show sometime. Let's talk about it. Thank you for your time.
Mark, thank you. I do look forward to being on the air with you and your listeners next week after I get out of post-summit recovery. We want to especially thank Summit Star Talent Finder Elise Sabbath for helping us put the debate together today, and we thank the Outdoor Channel for helping carry this important constructive exchange on one of the vital issues facing Americans to a wider audience. Katie Pavlich, Mark Levine, thanks so much for a great debate.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Katie.